Call the meeting to order.
Meeting of the Longmont Water Board, Monday, September 19th.
You want to do the roll call?
Yes. Roger Lang,
Here?
Allison Gould,
Here.
Tom Duster.
Here.
Staff, Ken Houston's here, Wes Lowry,
Yes.
Kevin Bowden,
Here.
Hope Bartlett,
Here.
and David Bell.
Here.
And Councilmember Marsha Martin.
Here.
Okay, Mayor, Chair, we have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Just a quick question. How about Jason? Is he here?
He's in the middle of a project, so I'm going to cover for him today.
It's a skeleton crew. Okay, let's talk about approving previous month's minute. Any comments or questions about the minutes from last month? Is there a motion to approve?
I so move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you. Who's doing the water status report?
That'll be me, Roger.
Okay, very good. Yeah.
The flow on the St. Vrain lines this morning was 34 CFS. It's, the historic average, 125-year historic average, is 54 CFS. The call on the St. Vrain Creek is the Niwot Ditch with a priority date of June 1st, 1865. Call on the main stem of the South Platte River was Harmony Ditch with a priority date of May 3rd, 1897. Right now, Ralph Price Reservoir at Mountain Rock was full and spilling at an elevation of 6,400.2 and passing the full North St. Vrain over the spillway, which is approximately 26 CFS. Union Reservoir was at an elevation of 25.2 feet or 10,756 acre feet, which is down approximately 2,000 acre feet from full, and releasing 16 CFS. On September 1st, 2022, St. Vrain Creek Basin storage was at 71%. So we're pretty dry out there, just from the flow on the St. Vrain.
And just a question, a year ago, if you can remember, was Ralph Price full and spilling also?
Yes.
Is it typical for?
Yeah.
Okay.
Occasionally we release some water in September, but we try to not start releases till October, hopefully even as late as November 1st.
Yeah, great. All right. Any questions for Kevin? Anybody? Thanks, Kevin. I don't see anybody from the public here, so we'll just move beyond that one. Any agenda revisions or submissions, Kim?
We have them.
Okay. Item 7, development activity, none and none. So we'll just move on to item 8. I guess Wes, that's you.
So this is the board's quarterly review for cash and lieu. Just remind everyone that it was back on March 8th when City Council approved Resolution 2022-35, set the fee for cash and lieu at concurrent $48,500 per acre feet, and that was based on the Windy Gap Firming project in its entirety, which was the equivalent of $30,000 per acre foot for the original Windy Gap version of the pumping project, and $18,500 for the city's current investment in the Windy Gap Firming project. And we were hoping, well, I shouldn't say we were hoping, we were anticipating there being some information on Windy Gap sales for PRPA, but we had contacts with them. It looks like that's not going to happen or be available till spring of next year. So we don't have any new data in terms of changing cost. The project itself is using some of the contingency money as they expected, and but we believe there's sufficient contingency money in there to continue with the project. So with all that being said, we're recommending no change to the current fee for cash and lieu.
And looking forward, you don't see much changing those numbers.
We do not. We'll continue to update the board. The next, I would say, substantial piece of information would come with the sale of CBT, or if we get to where they request the participants to contribute additional dollars because of low funds in the contingency fund. But right now, that's not being anticipated. So I think based upon council's direction, we're right where we should be.
Tom or Ellison, any comments?
Yeah, I mean,
How have we had applications? I think the last time we spoke about this, most people were trying to get in before the changeover. Have we had folks come in after and do
Bringing
this?
cash in lieu?
Yeah.
Yeah, good question. There was a lot of people that came in right before. Actually have one in the process right now of bringing a check in. I think that check was for around $170,000, which seems like a lot, but it actually only represents 3 or 4 acre feet. But we have seen cash in lieu coming into the city's coffers from after this change. So projects are still moving forward as they have been.
That's good to know.
yeah, I mean, I've always been a proponent of more information. It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot more to base an opinion on, so I don't see any rationale really for a change relative to previous discussions that we've had on the concepts.
Anything else?
That's all I have.
All right. So, item 9, you're gonna take that, Ken?
Yeah, first item to report on is some of our engineering projects that are ongoing right now. Probably the 2 most significant projects are we're constructing a pump station from the South St. Ring pipeline to be able to pump into the North St. Ring pipeline to pick up some of the winter water on our south diversion. It's a little more difficult to get otherwise. That project, the pump is in, and that's why Jason's not here today. They're actually doing the tie-in from the pump station to the north pipeline. So the cutting the pipe and putting it together, that'll take a couple days to do, but won't be too big of too lengthy of a project. But that's going on right now, so that's good. Should make the project halfway operational by sometime later in October. So that's good news. It's actually some of the last of our the purchase of that pump station, some of the last of our flood money. So we're that close to getting that done. The second project going on right now is some repairs to the outlet of Flood Dam. We had a failure of a flange gasket, and in addition, on our low flow jet flow gate, as well as the actual regulating gate where it seats down was leaking, and so we took the opportunity before, since the spillway is still spilling, all the water coming down can go over the spillway, so it doesn't impact the stream at all. This time of year, it's kind of critical to do that work this time of year. You can't do it in summer because you'd end up with too much flow over the spillway. You can't do it after November because we lose our St. Vrain supply canal. So there's always a real tight window in September to try to start a project like that. So that's just started, and Jason's looking at that as well. So hopefully both of those 2 projects, getting the old seat out of the old regulating gate is already out, so that part of the project going well. Now just getting a new seat put in and installed. So that should be coming along pretty good. And then the last, and I probably should have, hopefully this will come up. I was going to give you a quick update on the Windy Gap Fermi project. I should have turned that on a little while ago.
the interim, can I ask a quick question? Roger, do we need a affirmative vote on the cash in lieu?
Well, my opinion is, since nothing's changed and everybody, I didn't see that there would need to be one.
Yeah, we normally only vote if it's a recommendation to council.
Good question. I thought about that, but where I came out.
Make it up today. There we go.
Nice picture,
You
Ken.
look so happy,
Look
Ken.
at that. Look at the teeth on that guy.
There we go. So that's an actual picture from today. Of the
Wow.
Chimney Hollow project, so that's hot off the press. You can actually see, so there's the quarry that's been there a while, but you can see the asphalt plant is up there. That area, when the project's done, becomes the parking area for the Larimer County recreational area, which will be good. But you can see that. The bridge over the penstock is much, you can really see it now. And then they're still working on the plinth. Got a little bit more to do here, and then a little tiny bit, but a good portion of the plinth is down and constructed. A little bit of the rock fill is starting. And then over on this side, you can see the footprint of the dam very well. And over on this side, you can see some of the downstream filter, where any seepage would be picked up in the filter and then taken out under control fashion. So that's it. It probably doesn't look a whole lot different than last month, or even when we were up there touring it. It's coming along well. And I think, I don't know if we reported last summer, we did have the groundbreaking on the connectivity channel. That went well, and the nice thing about having groundbreaking, it was kind of a quick, got the permit, and that allowed some of the funding to come in, which allowed the contract to be let, which allowed the groundbreaking, which has allowed some of the last of the funding to come through. It's kind of everything was sitting there. Hey, we thought everything was ready to go, but it's now going. So the connectivity channel, with a little bit of luck in Grand County area, we'll have a little bit of time this fall to get some construction done. You can smoke there pretty quick, but they're getting started, so that's good. And that's all I.
And maybe this fluctuates a lot, but as far as being on schedule, is there a sense it's where we hoped it'd be, or?
It is. It's probably one of the ways you look at that is expected expenditure of funds, and how much you've expended. We're in about that 90%, 95% range, so as close as you can predict a construction project of this scale. So right now it's tracking on schedule.
Financially, is costs or?
And financially, we're, as you would expect, there are some change orders for mostly varying conditions in the foundation and a few other things, but for the most part, yes, we're still well within the budget. No big change orders yet.
Any other questions for Ken? Okay, thanks, Ken. So that's what Jason would report on, and anything else?
That's all we have on the projects.
So we'll
Hi, everybody. So I just wanted to give a quick update on a conference / workshop that we attended last week. It's called Growing Water Smart, and it's a yearly workshop put on by the Sonoran Institute and the Babbitt Center for Land Use Planning. And basically it's to put people who normally don't work together in the same room so that we can connect the dots between development and water resources. So Ken and I were able to go, and then we had 3 planners, a long-term planner, an environmental planner, and a development review. amongst some other wonderful GIS people, and we had a really wide array of people on our team to go up to Estes Park, and it's basically like a deep dive into where we want to see our city go in the face of our water resources and development, hand in hand. So we developed an action plan, and bless you, sorry, that's okay. And part of one of the perks of going to this workshop is that it opens up opportunities for funding. So we kind of created this mission statement for our Growing Water Smart team, which is not just the team that went, but a variety of other people who work on water-related projects in the city. So we have parks and open spaces, and stormwater and floodplain, and all kinds of water is involved in everything. So we've got people from all across the board on this large team. And you guys may remember that Francie went in 2020, and so this is our second, Francie went in 2020, so this is our second time attending. This time was different because we got to be in person, so we feel it was much more valuable to create those networking opportunities and personalized relationships with people. So we feel very much more motivated, and we created an action plan and a mission statement that I'll read for you. Despite the adversity we faced, Longmont is an adaptable community that continues to be a responsible steward of our resources. But Colorado is challenged by water issues, and Longmont is not as resilient as we could be. Our path forward can better reflect our values. Therefore, we can commit to fostering an equitable, safe, and resilient community that contributes to Colorado's water future. So basically, we came up with some overarching long-term goals. The long horizon goal is we would like to update our code and design standards to reflect water efficiency better, so that we are developing with water efficiency in mind instead of having to focus on retrofitting developments that are new. We also want to coordinate upcoming plan updates with water efficiency in mind. So as you all know, we have our water efficiency master plan update coming up. That's going to lay a lot of the groundwork and language for other plans to borrow from. So Parks and Open Space is doing an update, as well as sustainability. And then the city's comprehensive plan is also hopefully going to be updated soon as well. So we're really making sure to have a coordinated effort between all of those plan updates so that we're all on the same page and developing and planning for the same goals. And we're going to do all of this with projects that are data-driven, so we can have data-driven proof decisions. Lots of community engagement and outreach, lots more efficiency on public property. So in our last month's meeting, we mentioned the city becoming kind of a role model for water efficiency, and that was a big part of what we wanted to do. We want to focus on what we can control here, kind of get some quick, fast, easy wins, develop some case studies, get really good data on why we should be water efficient, so that we can prove to council eventually someday why we should update our code and prove what works and how it saves water by being efficient.
Council is all over those updates, so
Good.
just get them ready.
We're ready. We're not ready. We're ready to be ready. And we broke it out into subcommittees, which is probably the main difference between how we're moving forward with the project management of Growing Water Smart versus 2020. And so it's not just me, as it was just Francie kind of coordinating, wrangling the cats. We kind of are doing a subcommittee approach to disseminate and delegate leadership, so we can hold accountability more. So yeah, we're excited.
Where was the meeting going to take place?
It was in Estes Park, and it was 3 days of pretty intense breakout workshops, facilitated brainstorming, but it was really great. All of the planning is really excited, and we're excited to get these projects moving.
A lot of communities attending?
4 other communities attended, So Cheyenne was there, which was the first from Wyoming to ever participate, and then us and Broomfield, Windsor, and Lyons. So 5. Yes. Yeah. And it was great to have Lyons there too, since we're right next door and we provide their treated water. So it was good to collaborate with them.
Very good. Anything else, Paul?
That's all.
All right, thanks a lot. Yes.
Question about what kind of the long-term vision looks like as far as turf, in terms of turf replacement, and then also codes as far as what we have in our future development. I don't know if that's something that is going to be part of what is going to be presented to City Council.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, so I have a question, a reinforcing question maybe about that. I, first of all, just have to brag a little bit. I just had my turf inverted
Yes.
and have xeriscape plants and a drip system in my yard now, and I'm doing all of this scut work of mulching it and, you know, all that stuff. It doesn't require any skills, and I'm not very strong at it. But the situation we've got is that Longmont can adopt policies or even codes that manage households, right? You know, require or have to do with single-family home turf removals. But existing HOAs, and I'm not sure about, you know, future HOAs, that maintain their own green air spaces, I don't think we have any ability to tell them they have to pull out their turf and re-landscape that, because homeowners associations are quasi-governmental agencies that are sort of not underneath the municipality in certain ways. And so I wondered whether that was discussed. You know, recently, within the last few years recently, the state legislature awarded homeowners in HOAs the right to xeriscape their own property regardless of what their HOA covenants are.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't speak to the land that is maintained by the HOA covenants. So I just wondered whether that was put on the table. You know, it's been discussed on the legislative side that, you know, we would like to request that our representatives try to broaden that exception at the state level so that the HOAs don't have to, you know, we can restrict the amount of turf that they use. So, question for you.
Yeah, that specifically did not come up.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't aware of that, so that's good. I mean, that's something that we're hoping to do a lot of, is really deep dive into our current code and design standards, and figure out, like, because right now our code is very vague, and it says things like preferred low water plants, and like that doesn't really mean anything. So we're hoping that as we move forward with these projects, that we really do some deep dive into our current code, current laws, what we can and can't do, and that has a lot to do with HOAs too.
Mm-hmm.
I can speak to a lot of community members are really interested in doing a lot of like retrofits in their HOA common areas, and I feel like if it's resident driven, then the HOA will are more likely to adopt that. But that's good to keep in mind. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And one thing that our legislator could maybe even help a little bit is when I read the statute on you can't compel a property owner in an HOA, and they don't use the term HOA, but I think it's something like community something, but it's HOAs. it's clear that you can't compel the private property owner. There are some that don't feel that applies to the HOA itself.
That's what I was trying to say,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I read it that, and I'm not an attorney, so
Okay,
I gotta think that you also quote can't compel the HOA, but it's not clear enough. And so I think,
Okay.
yeah, that would be great if.
well, that would be great, I mean, if we changed our code so that, you're limited on turf, or you have to reduce or something, and, I mean, I'd be happy to test that.
Yeah.
So maybe getting an opinion on how far that extends.
It's an area we probably need to look at a little harder.
Yeah.
So, Marcia, where is this heading for single-family residences?
Where is it heading?
Well, what lies down, is there a discussion about having codes for them, how much turf they can
No.
have, or is that
Right
even
now-
a discussion? Or
Right now, no. I mean, right now, what's happening, as David could probably explain it better than I have, is that we're focusing on incentives now. You want to
Yeah.
maybe explain, because I don't know, for example, how much more we put in the budget for incentives.
So that probably is a kind of hope piece of there. We on the park side are the ones that are doing stuff internally in the parks on some of the city properties that we have right now. So we are actually taking steps to do conversions for a couple of reasons. One, to get out in front and see what really works, to reduce the water demand for the city, but also then to be an example for our residents and say, here's something you can come out and actually look, and it can be a demonstration type product, be that conversion of grass types to different grass types, or as you did, take it from turf to some sort of xeric landscaping.
Mhm.
So I don't know on the bringing dollars in, if we've done anything yet to help with the residential side.
Yes, we have talked about it.
Yeah, so we work with Resource Central, and last summer was our trial period to see how successful it was. It was wildly successful. We had 40-something applicants and could only fund 12 projects.
Wow.
So we doubled our budget for next year. And then we also have applied for a grant through St. Vrain Left-Hand Water Conservancy District to give us more money so that we can make it bigger. But the plan is to increase those incentives year over year. And then state funding will come into play as well. So the CWCB, the House bill that just passed recently for the turf removal incentives, hopefully we'll apply to get some money through them as well.
So, David, from a city standpoint, some of our properties we're talking parks and what, are you zeroing in on a particular initial one where you actually remove turf? I'm just kind of curious.
So we've done it mostly, where we've done removals right now has really been around municipal buildings. So this building right here, actually, we have taken out bluegrass, and I think, I don't remember what species we put in out here, but
It's a wheatgrass.
coastal wheatgrass, yep, that we put out here. So much more, less water needs for those species. Then over at the Sunset Building, we've taken the turf out in front of that. I think we put a dog turf in one area, and on the other side, a dog turf. And on the other side, we put a rock type landscaping with xeric plants. So we're really doing it on properties that we've done the taking out of turf, putting in. We've done it on city properties that are really municipal buildings and accesses. As far as our parks, it's been a design piece that for probably several years now that we've looked at our parks and said, do we really need all that turf? And we've been designing in more native naturalized areas. That could be pollinator habitat, it could be more xeric, but really trying to provide that green space for the cooling and for people to go out and just use that, but looking at those peripheries especially as spaces that really could be designed as more naturalized areas that don't require as much water. And that the next ones coming up would be Nino Gallo and Clover Basin, with both ones that have a probably much more significant amount of naturalized area than you would have seen 20 years ago.
And I can maybe update you too, is
Yeah.
that we just started this project working with Northern Water.
On the park.
Yep,
Yes.
with the Parks Department. So we're doing a advanced sprinkler audit on Roosevelt Park and
Garden acres.
Garden Acres. And then we also are having them help us determine areas of those parks to transition. So at Roosevelt, there's a hill with some trees on it that's never used, and so we're like, okay, let's put native grass there. And then there are some other potentials to do different varieties of demonstration projects at Roosevelt Park. And then there's a lot of space at Garden Acres where we can potentially just reduce the mowing and reduce the watering and kind of let the native species that are already in that area kind of take over where the ditch is. And so there are some things that we're working on to do current parks
Now,
too.
you said advanced sprinkling at Roosevelt.
Advanced
What does that
irrigation
mean?
audit. So Northern Water sponsors irrigation audits for big properties like golf courses and parks. And so we're getting this advanced irrigation audit, which an engineering firm is coming in to do a systems-based audit. So they're gonna look at the way the system is designed, not only if our sprinkler heads are efficient, they'll tell us that too, but then they're gonna look at, okay, like this pipe doesn't make sense to hook into this pipe and those things.
So I have, I guess, 3 constituent-related questions that kind of fit into this. So if we're not too strapped for time, one is sprinkler system audits. I have had resident complaints about mosquitoes. And what I do is I go out, and it's always, from an apartment building. Nobody from a single family home ever complains. Right. But people don't like the spraying though. And so I go out there and say, yeah, this is all HOA land. We can't get the city to do anything about this standing water. But boy, do these HOAs need a sprinkler system audit.
Yeah.
So if there's a...
There is, yes. Northern Water and our sponsors that as well with Resource Central. So we have a goal to do at least 5 big properties a year. And so HOAs just have to apply and then it's free for them.
Great.
Yeah.
So we need to have somebody selling the idea to them.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, including my neighborhood, who waters the street a lot.
Yeah, that's common.
Yeah. This is a constituent question for Dave, I think, which is, I was in the historic East Side, and they're worried about their old trees because people are watering their lawns less. And the city doesn't water the right-of-ways in that HOA list neighborhood, and they're worried that the trees aren't gonna get enough water. So do we think about that? Do we have a soil test that we can see how the tree is doing?
So we think about it too, and it's one of the things that we're thinking about as we're looking at. So there's a couple of things. Water conservation is something I think is a very responsible way, but also water can get expensive for some people. When you have those large trees there, it really is when you have to start cutting back, where do you cut back? So in that historic east side, we're trying to look at those trees and see if there's something we need to do in our code to say we recognize we need to keep this asset from losing that. So we're looking at that right now. So we don't have a new solution, but it's something we have looked at over time, even prior to some of the water conservation. Just the idea that we're putting that burden on individuals that may not have the same interest or prioritization of that city resource within that area.
Right. So, it used to just be accidental because they were watering the front yard with sprinklers, but now.
So we are looking at, so our forestry and timber and the parks group are looking at that to see how we can do a better job of making sure that we're meeting our water conservation goals, but also not losing some of the assets that again help cooling and all those other pieces for a city.
And you also monitor the trees for health, I assume, because we've got some ancient cottonwoods that probably are at their end of life anyway.
That's one of the pieces that probably a little bit more you're asking, but as I was going out and looking at some of our parks and seeing some of the areas that I felt were a little bit lacking, is because we really have shifted over and really started looking at some of those more historic, higher quality trees that have a risk to people and property if they fail. So there's a tree limb cycle that we try to get on, like in about every 10 years, every tree gets looked at. We're taking that down below 10 years now. So really, that's what we've been trying to do, is get caught up on all those big trees that are getting older and making sure that the health of those trees is something we want to keep out there in the community, or if we need to replace it. and if it needs to be pruned in a way that helps maintain the health. So those big trees are a high value, high asset, high risk if we don't take care of it. So we've been focused on those right now. Some of the little guys aren't much of a risk, so I've been seeing a little bit more loss in those areas, but we're trying to find that balance.
Okay.
And we also have part of our, we have I'll call it pre-programmed information, public information on water conservation, and part of that we zero right in on make sure you continue to water your trees, and even suggest in the winter time periods people get out there in January and February and water their trees, and they might not otherwise think of it because there's no leaves there, but they need moisture. So we do have that in our information pre-program packets.
Thank you. Those are both great answers. My last constituent question to constituent is Allison, who the last time I saw you, Allison, we were both zooming out the door and you mentioned something about if we have water surpluses, do we have a way of leasing it to a consumer on the west slope where the drought is? And so because all of our conservation efforts we know are pretty much, so far, they're proactive, right? We always have enough water. This is just, I don't expect you to have the answer, but I think that the council would approve, some water quality improvement leases, river quality improvement leases, if we had the capability of doing it. But of course, the council has no idea whether the city has the capability of doing it.
So we don't have an individual capability of doing it because for two reasons. One is the Windy Gap water is only pumped if it's needed.
Sure.
So it's not, and sometimes not needed, but don't
Right.
pump it. But there isn't any excess pump, so to speak. For the CBT system, that underlying water right, is owned by the federal government, and it's just distributed by Northern Water. But Longmont, as a allottee, can get an allotment, but the state law is pretty clear that you can only use water rights and projects of the Conservancy District within the boundaries of the district. So to get around all of that, the Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District, I'll say maybe more the general broader front range water users, have gone together, or went together years ago, and acquired water on the west slope. There's a ditch called the Red Top Ditch, diverts out of the Colorado River upstream of Shadow Mountain. Colorado River goes into Shadow Mountain and then flows down to Granby. So they purchased a lot of the shares on the Red Top Ditch. And you can't, essentially quit irrigating a bunch of high mountain meadows that, it was grass hay, nice to go grass hay, but better use for that water was leaving in the stream. So that water from the Red Top Ditch accrues to the project to see Shadow Mountain and Lake Granby, and then it is dedicated to downstream water use, and primarily the 15-mile reach and endangered fish species on the Colorado River. So that's a fairly effective. It's, if I remember right, it's been years, but I remember it's around 5,000 acre feet. So that was a lot more effective than if Longmont were to say, "Oh, we got a couple hundred acre feet we could lease,"
Yeah.
So that's 5,000 acre feet. And then in addition, part of the Windy Gap Firming project, the first 1,800 or so acre feet is assigned to, goes to the west slope. So they get to use that. And so that's used, but as part of the settlements with the firming project, if the west slope doesn't need that for consumptive use, i.e. Middle Park Water Conservancy District, any of that excess then in August becomes available to the Grand County, who then can use it to augment the Colorado River in that August period. Windy Gap is never, hardly ever pumping. It's never pumped in August, but even though it doesn't pump, the natural stream flow is getting a little too warm.
So we cool it off and the fish don't die.
So it's released in August. So there's the simple answer. Those programs are actually much more effective. They are done. So. We just can't say I'm going to take a little bit of our water, Longmont, and send it somewhere because.
Right. And so that's always the answer I've given, and I've never really been sure of my ground. But I get it, the question a lot, right? Can't we just put it back? And so the answer is that regionally, those needs are designed in to the extent that we can, and we're doing what we can. Yeah. And as a municipality, there's not a really effective way to do it.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be as effective if we tried to do it ourselves. But certainly, yeah, council's always supported Longmont and Northern, and has supported those kind of regional. I think supporting the connectivity channel and the red top ditch deal, and all those things that happen. It'd be wonderful if we could do more, but it's best done regionally.
Right. Thank you.
Does that sound good? Reasonable, Allison? I value your thoughts on it too.
Well, it's complicated, that's for sure.
Very, very.
Yeah. I just to cut David back to the city removing turf, and I think it's important that we can aesthetically do some of these things. I mean, things can look pretty good even though grass isn't there. And to the extent maybe we can show, for two reasons, here's how good it can look, and also we're doing our part. I think that's important.
We do too. That's one of the things I think, trying to get on the front where we can do demonstration stuff. If you talk about mulching, that mulching can be, wood mulch, it can be rock mulch. Rock mulch is not this haphazardly just dumped in a spot and then starts growing weeds in it. But we've done stuff over Roosevelt, the entrance there. We've taken down some of the plant materials there. We put in some more. Really, my park staff has gone through like rock by rock places, so it does have an aesthetic look to it. So using rocks, using organic mulches, using right plants in the right place is another really important piece that we try to do. And again, I think there's a lot of pieces that, as we think about this, that just taking out turf, bluegrass in itself, it helps water be taken in and absorbed more slowly than just running off. So we think about the runoff side of it, we think about the cooling side of it, we think about the greenhouse gas absorption by grasses too. So how do you strike that balance of keeping our city cool and green while having, again, that water conservation piece? So I think as we keep going forward this, we'll keep in our parks and in our public spaces get chances to try to evaluate that, and hoping with Hope, who works very closely with Ben Grattan and my horticulture crew over there, that that relationship is we can start measuring that too and say, did we achieve our goals? If the goal is just to reduce water, there's ways to do that. If it's a way to reduce water, maintain those aesthetics, maintain some of those other desires of our community, I think that's much harder. I think we're working really hard at achieving that right now, finding that balance.
That's hopefully going to be part of our Growing Water Smart. We have one person who's really dedicated to creating those metrics and creating project templates so that we can have all of our projects being measured by the same metrics. So that's really important. And then I just want to say that came up a lot, that point at the workshop, is that turf is not evil. Like, that's not what our goal is to, like, we can't just live in a world without turf. It's important. But that's when efficiency comes into play. Of like, if this is essential turf and it's used, then we want to make sure that it's used and we're watering it in the most efficient way.
What is the incentive for turf? What are we offering to the city now?
We're offering sort of like a stipend, so up to $750 of working with Resource Central. And you can use that money whether you get a discount on having Resource Central remove your turf at a discounted rate, so without being within the community of Longmont. It's $2.50 per square foot of removal. With the Resource Central program, it's $1. And so you could use, if you have a 750 square foot that you want to remove, you can just pay them to do all of it. Or you can get garden in a box plants. So it's kind of a choose your own adventure stipend that we provide for our community members.
I'm not familiar with Resource Central.
Yeah, it's a nonprofit that operates out of Boulder, and they're the ones who run and manage the majority of our programs. So they're a conservation-based organization that tries to get our communities in Boulder County, and actually all across the Front Range. They work all the way up to Greeley to Colorado Springs, and actually Pueblo too. So they provide garden in a box is a curated, water-efficient program that you basically get a plant by number guide, and then they give you all the plants and you just follow how to plant it. And then we do their turf removal program as well. And then they also provide education, so we use them for water-wise seminars that we do twice a year, and our slow-to-flow irrigation audits for multifamily homes like our HOA properties and businesses, churches, big properties, as well as individual homes.
In real quick on the turf conversion piece and what we're doing right now, that was something that I think some council members brought to our attention, that other communities were actually taking part in that, and what was Longmont doing, and we looked at what we were doing and not doing, and it really was Ken just taking the initiative and saying, we can find some dollar, we can't really probably do it all without a budget cycle, but we can find some dollars within our program, so Ken really made that happen.
Thank you, Ken. Because I don't know who else got letters, but I sure did. You know, my neighbor down in Lafayette got their turf removed.
Yeah.
If we knew we were going to be there at some point, like I said, Ken just said, let's just get in front of it and see what we can do.
Yeah, and it was oversubscribed, right?
Yes.
Now I'm feeling guilty because I figured I wouldn't get in.
No, feel lucky.
Yeah, well, I do feel lucky, but it's like, you know.
No, don't feel guilty. It's great.
So-
We're gonna get everybody eventually.
So the next trick is to teach a carbon sequestration class, right? So people know how to manage
Right.
their newly available soil so that it sucks up.
Yes.
I love that.
Okay.
Need David's help with that.
Yeah.
Those grasses do a great job. You don't realize how much biomass is underground and really how much carbon sequestration grasses and stuff really provide us. So.
Right. And there are some people in organizations like Stand With Our St. Vrain that are heavily into that. So
Definitely work close with that group too.
Yeah, good discussion. All right.
Ron, I have a question.
Sorry.
So, not to keep going back and forth between two kind of different conversations, but can I have a question about like the red top ditch deal and things that you were talking about? Who like where do those projects come from? So, in other words, like this, you know, in the case of the couple of examples that you showed, like, did those come from Northern Water or from the Bureau or from somebody, or Reclamation, of course, or somebody, or did, you know, from top down, or did that come from kind of like some grassroots kind of idea that kind of trickled up from the bottom upward, or do you remember in those cases?
The red top ditch whole concept, you credit Northern Water. How it happened was as part of the conversations around the endangered species on the Colorado River. And I don't remember the numbers, but when a species conservation plan is done, or more accurately, it's called a recovery implementation plan. That identified a large amount, I'm gonna say like around 15,000 acre feet of water that was needed in the 15-mile reach, which is just upstream of Grand Junction, the critical reach for the endangered fish on the Colorado River. How is that gonna happen? And so all water providers looked pretty hard. Some water was available out of Root High Reservoir, and I think that water's leased. I'm not 100% sure, but there was some excess water in Root High. It wasn't a lot. That was a federal reclamation project, but all of the allotment wasn't taken up. So some of the water came from there, and then I believe Denver Water did a, I hope I'm saying this right, I believe Denver Water did some water out of Wolford Mountain Reservoir, because when they built Wolford Mountain, they didn't need it. That was half of the Colorado River Water Conservancy District, and half of it was taken up by Denver, but it was the Colorado River. So Windy Gap was built, the original project in '85, we made a payment to the West Slope to build compensatory storage. So Wolford Mountain was a compensatory storage reservoir for the West Slope for the Windy Gap project. Denver Water came to the table with some money, so they got like capacity in Wolford Mountain for like 50 years or something like that. And then of that overall capacity, some of that was dedicated to that. So there's some of that, but then the water provider in the northern Colorado, through Northern Water, so we've got to come up with some water too. How do we do that? And it was determined too difficult to just say, hey, we got some water in CBT water we sent down there. And that's when the idea of the red top ditch. And so,
it's the idea comes from these big multi-stakeholder kind of engagements
Yes.
that then identify need, then the various stakeholders go out and try to identify ways to meet that need, and in a collaborative fashion. And so, yeah, that makes, of course, sense.
So the Windy Gap project, CBT, Northern Water, well, CBT purchased a lot of the red top ditch, but Windy Gap project also contributed some. I believe the Fermi project early on contributed a little bit of money to that red top. I can't remember how that all broke out, but it was a result of regional cooperation and Northern Water stepping up, saying we need to make this happen, and here's how we can make it happen without impacting.
And when it's all said and done, Northern Water is the representative for the various people that get water through Northern Water, and they're ultimately the stakeholder on those committees or in those entities. Yeah. And so they, in a way, I mean, for all intents and purposes, they represent us in a way in those efforts.
I'm sorry, just to tell you, but you know how complicated this is. We talk about that regional ability to work with the West Slope. When you have that little bit water Longmont has left over, why can't we send it there? Can also get pushes, why can't we use it here? We have local agriculture coming to Longmont quite often saying, if you guys have some additional water, why aren't we using it here and staying down the ditches? We also have ecosystem needs here that, a lot of those times it'd be nice to have some water in our St. Brain for our fisheries here too. So, trying to deal with these local issues plus those regional issues, Ken and Wes in this group is always going to kind of pull down where is the best place to kind of keep our water, hold our water, make sure we're not drawing things from our next year's needs here locally too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think, not to chime in without raising my hand, but so I do think that, like, if and we've talked about this, I think, multiple times. It's kind of come up quite a bit. I think that there's some interest in this room about having some kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of mitigation program, right? Like, but if Longmont is to control such a thing, right, then I think the water that we have the greatest amount of control over is things like, water at Button Rock, for example, and to be able to kind of like design our systems in such a way that we're getting water into the St. Vrain in ways that are helpful to our kind of local ecosystems, right? And so we've even had discussions within the kind of the framework of some of the options for water coming out of Longmont Dam and that project that would have put water further up into the river, further upstream, for example, in under varying kind of those options that would put water further upstream into from there. So those are the types of things that I feel like we may have like some control over and potentially could innovate around. I think like the West Slope is probably such a complicated discussion that those things, those things are very much outside of our realm of direct influence at the very least. But like I said, these kind of local ecosystem issues, we may have more ability to do something.
I think that's a great idea, and if I had been rude enough to ask a fourth question, that would have been it. It was like, but I don't know how long the agenda is, so I thought maybe another time.
Pretty well ran out. So
We're at the close to the
We're
end.
Yeah.
Well then, so
Well, you got 10 minutes more.
okay, Roger, this is not a 10-minute question. I frequently am asked by the people on the far edge of the conservation special interest, why do we have golf courses? Why don't we drive those up? Why don't we? And I always come back and say, well, you probably are in a minority about wanting to dry up the golf courses so far, but what are you going to do with the water that you're not using on those golf courses? And so at some point, it seems to me that we should be developing some hierarchy, because even if the water stays on the east slope, you've got golf courses at one end of the spectrum and keeping our reservoirs full, and then you've got agriculture east of us, and then you've got sending water down so that the water table out near Kansas can be replenished. That's a stretch, because I don't really know. Sometimes you read that those water tables are at risk. But I don't know. But it would be good if Longmont had more of a policy about that, or maybe internally we do and it's not articulated. But I just think it's something to think about.
Yeah, we certainly can put more detail to that. Our guiding water principle says that if we have excess water that we can use, that doesn't impact our water supply, that we can use that for some environmental projects. And that's not a very specific.
Yeah.
I mean, I totally agree with that guiding water principle, but yeah, more meat on that could be done.
Well, yeah, and that's right, because when the council is asked a question like, why are we wasting water on golf courses, we don't have an answer for where is the other unmet need. Because in Longmont right now we don't have any unmet needs, but there might be higher and better uses than a golf course at some point in the future, and so we should have thought it through before, there are more than 3 people in the city that are asking that question. I know it's 3.
Just a question about golf course watering. Is that treated water we are using? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, or?
Two of our
Yeah, I was gonna
courses
say.
are raw water. One of
our courses is treated.
Which one's treated?
Sunset's treated.
You know, and I heard that, I always thought there was ditch water running right through Sunset, and why are we using treated water? I'm sure I'm missing something, but maybe all that water that runs through there is spoken for, I don't know.
Yeah,
Making any sense at all?
historically, there was some ditches that ran through there, and I think at one time it probably was irrigated with raw water.
I heard that too.
But at some point it was transferred over to treated. So.
I was gonna say, your staff is always thinking that way. I know Ken had just talked to me again about it, but there's definitely those trade-offs as far as, that's a conversation that we need to have with recreation, because, managing a group that manage some parts with domestic water or treated water and some with raw water. Raw water has definitely some challenges for an operational side of things, be it filters and pumps and ponds and all those pieces. So it does have some challenges, but I know Ken and I have just recently talked about his desire to say, what can we really do to look at trying to make sure as we convert parks to raw water, also doing that for all of our golf courses.
Yeah, okay.
And I do apologize, I have a 4 o'clock with Dave.
Thanks, David.
Yep.
Glad we got this
Yes.
into the discussion.
I was gonna say, it started stirring.
See you, David.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, moving on.
Roger, may I
yeah.
deliver it?
Can you what?
May I please deliver this?
Yeah.
Just a couple of things. This has been a really great discussion, and I would love it if we could continue it. I think that, to take your point, a lot of the water that we get from the West Slope is by virtue of our participation in deals with Northern. So Northern in some ways is our representative, but also we are their client. And to the extent we have interests in figuring out solutions where some of the water that we would otherwise divert and conserve can be put back into the West Slope system when and where it's needed, I think that voicing that interest to Northern, if it doesn't come from us, who would it come from? And they're the ones who are going to know their system better than anybody else. But if they don't have somebody coming to them and telling them that that's what they would like to see happen, why would they do it? I mean, their goal is to deliver water to us for what we want it for. If that's all we're telling them that we want from them, then why would they ever do anything different? So that's point number one. Point number two is there's a lot of reservoirs up there. There's a lot of different Bureau of Reclamation contracts up there. One of the things that my organization does is it buys water from the Bureau of Reclamation that is already decreed for hydropower, and it delivers it down to Orchard Mesa, which is right by a 15-mile reach, for hydropower purposes. So it takes things that are already decreed for certain uses and buys them and gets them to where they want it. And the key there is timing. The fish recovery program is about 300 to 400 CFS short almost every year. It's getting worse in the late summer, and it's a matter of timing.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. It's just this really discrete period. It's not all whole time. It's just this one discrete period because you have different calls on the river, and it's when this big call down comes off, all of these trans-basin diverters are like, oh man, now's our time, go for it. And we just seriously pump like crazy just to refill. And like, for example, the Roaring Fork goes dry almost every year for this exact reason. And if we could just figure out ways to retime that and just get the water back in the river just for that discrete period of time, it would make a heck of a difference. The last point is, you were touching upon this, there's programs out there, we don't want to lose our water rights. Like, that's something that Longmont has done an incredibly good job of shoring up over the course of 70 longer years. If we do loss of conservation, which I totally think we should be cognizant of the fact that by not using that water, we're opening ourselves up to decrease in the historic consumptive use, which diminishes the value of our water rights and also potential abandonment. There are programs out there that are intended to protect that, but they take doing to get them in place. So to the extent we want to protect our water rights, but simultaneously take advantage of the fact that we can do conservation, I think we should marry the two so that we can do both.
Okay, those are great points. I didn't know that either. And I just want to put in, in terms of regional influence and something that we Longmont have at least some struggle with, is the water rights that belong to Platte River Power Authority, because they are, in the next 15 years, probably, unless they get heavily into hydrogen electrolysis, are gonna need less water. And they've got more water than they need now. And so, those water rights need to be protected or properly disposed of. And even if they're in electrolysis, I mean, that's a pump that you prime and then you can recapture the water and use it over and over again. So, we should use our influence with PRPA on water policy. I guess it's part of that whole general, it's not an immediate need, but we shouldn't be caught flat-footed on this.
One final point, and I'll drop that.
No, that's all right.
In terms of providing water to agriculture, I think that's great if we can do that. We should time it in a way that not only does it deliver large agriculture, but maybe it fortifies the stream in between. So say we know that the Savory Creek really tanks in like 15 days in September, that's when we just like time our deliveries to ag that's downstream of that dry stretch. So we can do both. It doesn't have to be a zero sum.
Or we can do the same, we'll do it with the same water.
Same water. Yeah. So
The problem with that is a lot of our ditches come out so far west in Lyons that the dry up point is down here. So like on the Highland system, they're pulling out way up by Lyons to get it out, you know. But the dry up is down here. And that's where you're seeing a lot of dry stream. So.
Ken Buck has a bill that he runs periodically about farther east ditches. You know, I'm not Ken Buck's biggest fan, but there is a bill out there that might fund rearranging the ditches so that seasonal needs would be better addressed by the network.
You know, speaking of maybe unused water, when's the last time the comp plan has been updated or is in the process of being updated now, Marcia, or?
Yeah, I don't know. You know, just because I'm not smart enough to look at the budget and see whether those pieces are in there. You know, there's comp plans, new comp plan items in the budget, but I don't know how much of a revision there is. Do you, Ken?
Yeah, I don't, you know, they kind of indicated to us that they would really like to get started on a comp plan update within the year.
I believe they're looking to start their RFP process within this year or next year to get a consultant to do
Yeah,
that.
and that was the thing I was talking with you and Harold about too, is
Density.
is what densities we model, because, you know, the planners are looking at considerable increases in density, which means, you know, less turf.
Well, that's
More stacked up,
where my
yeah.
thought, it just seems like our densities are, I don't know if they were planned for, but it's coming our way, and
Right.
do we have, you know, what are the consequences water-wise? You know,
Yeah.
very long range, but you know,
Well,
it's
it's
all
not.
stuff to think about.
It's not that long range anymore. You know, because of the housing crunch that we're in from many different directions. From people needing housing to, you know, we don't really know if we got more than 120,000 people here, which is the end of our current comp plan. We don't know how much water we would, how much population we could
So
support.
I can tell you that what you're currently seeing out there, which, does look at, was really contemplated in the last comp plan update, which was then incorporated into our latest, most recent future water supply demand analysis. So we have the water for what's happening now, and what you're seeing now. If the comp plan updates has significant, and I'm not talking going from 4 stories to 5 stories, talking maybe 20, really, it's really significant increases. Then we would have to take a look at that. But I can tell you, without running the numbers yet, water conservation is going to play an enormous role in meeting that future demand. I'm very confident in our conservation program. It's going to really take us and help us. And so that will be very significant. And then the second was we have projects, conditional filings and projects out there that we can rely. The water we would need to get would be attainable through projects. It's money, but it's attainable. It's a little bit different than when I think about Aurora. They're growing out to the east, bare bone dry country. They got to do something else. They got to go get water somewhere. Different than Longmont. Very fortunate to have foresight in the project.
Yeah, just one last thing. Your comment about some influence in northern water, I don't know if you ever, are you asking the question where that can come from, or how do we influence them? I'm not sure where you were going with that.
I guess asking them the question first. I mean, I don't know. I would defer to him as more.
Well, Marcia and I sit on
the Windy Gap, which is a
Windy Gap.
subset. But the other question I have is I wrote recommendations for 2 former water board members to be on the Northern Water Board. I don't know whether either of them were selected or not.
Well, Todd's on the Northern Board, and Dennis Yanchunas is on the Northern Board.
Okay.
Both former water board members.
Okay. So 2 out of 3. I didn't. Dennis was before my time, I believe.
Yeah, not too long. I mean.
Yeah. Maybe he was. He didn't ask me for a recommendation. Pam was Pam. Is that right? She used to sit where Roger's sitting all the time.
She's faded.
No, it wasn't Pam. It wasn't
What was
me.
it?
Renee Davis may have.
Yeah, I think maybe.
That might have been it.
Might have been it. Maybe she moved out of the area, so.
She moved out to Denver.
Yeah, so she would have had to resign if she was selected.
Right.
But yeah, I think not only Longmont influencing the board, but the other firm. We've got Boulder who is would be
Always
less.
do that.
Longmont and
Broomfield.
Fort Collins is really leaning there. I think generally the larger municipalities would.
Yeah.
That, their board just needs to hear from us.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a while.
And that means that the people who know what could be suggested, need to raise the issues before the council, and then we can push the policy suggestions around.
Okay.
I was just gonna really quickly add in, I mean, so those West Slope issues are, I guess the point I was trying to get to before was that those West Slope issues are so publicized. It's the Colorado River, it's a big thing, right? And so there's these multi-stakeholder entities that need to figure out what is needed on the river and what we can do, et cetera, right? And I agree that, being engaged with that and especially working with our partners and pressuring or working with them in some way to kind of, be engaged in those programs is really important. Of course, having worked for smaller kind of, for kind of, similar organizations to kind of like Colorado Parks and Wildlife or something, but on smaller streams and rivers, right? Those are, of course, not nearly as publicized. I mean, I don't know that any of us could, I think some of us in here could figure out what is needed on the West Slope or heard that in the news or something, but for example, what's needed in the St. Vrain, right? And we worked with our kind of like local, very local, hyper-local program managers and things with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks just right here in our local area that we could potentially have influence on by helping with the needs in our local streams and rivers that we again have more kind of control over, right? And I feel like, those issues of course are of lesser priority, both at Fish and Wildlife, but also, with news organizations and things like that, so we don't really know what is needed in this kind of local, hyper-local kind of area, right? But again, I think that those types of projects, those are the types of places that our local populace goes, on weekends to go fishing, et cetera. And if it was like, there was a sign at some, I don't know, some popular fishing spot that basically said, some fraction of this water was provided by your local water, organization, by the city of Longmont, essentially. Those are the types of things I think that really do a good job of kind of like leading by example, by kind of exemplifying the values that Longmont wants to, or being the change that we want to see in the world, essentially. Those are the types of things that I think we have more control over and are maybe a little bit easier wins than trying to solve the West Slope problems, although we should of course be engaged in that as well. But anyway, those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, and along that line, we work closely, Kevin worked really closely with the St. Vrain and Left-Hand Water Conservancy District on a stream management plan.
Yeah.
And that stream management plan really gives you a guidance of what we need locally on the St. Vrain Creek, all the way from environmental flows to recreational flows to projects.
Right.
And rehab. And so, that I think that is, stream management plan is kind of our local area's goal or vision for helping the St. Vrain. So, and I agree, that we can have some influence on. and I believe the district is interested in trying to now. They've made the plan, now start moving forward with it. Interesting.
Okay. Item 11, informational items and water board correspondence. I had a question, and I don't know if it pertains particularly to this item, but in the information Heather sent us some information about board appointments. And if we had anybody in mind that might be interested in water, I was just kind of curious. Tom and Allison, have you two come up with anybody that you have proposed to apply for the board? I mean, and you don't need to share, but I mean, is that something that there's some movement on?
Well, I'll just mention, so I have not suggested anyone. So my problem is that my kind of community, my water community, is kind of distant from local, right? Because my work is down in Denver, and I engage in a variety of different kind of statewide issues, but I don't necessarily, this is my first kind of foray into the Longmont water scene, let's say, so I'm relying on all of you really to be kind of tough to learn from, and so I haven't, other than out inside this entity, I haven't really kind of engaged outside. So maybe with some folks at Left-Hand, but so that's been my issue. Allison,
Yeah, I reached out when we had the last opening. I was particularly interested in trying to get an engineer. And there's a couple of water engineering firms in town.
Well, if we can do that, I've tried and did not get much movement. The person I was looking at, so anyway,
Yeah, I mean,
it's too bad. I hope we can fill another position. We'll have to see how it works
I
out.
know there was one individual, he's more in the development community that was interested, but he didn't get his application in on time. And so when it's reposted, I believe he's gonna reapply.
Well, it's opening now to reapply.
It is.
So if there's some out there, in fact, I don't know what's the cutoff date, October,
Yeah. 31st or something.
October 14th.
October 14th,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Give that guy a poke.
sorry?
I said, give that guy a poke.
I will. Yep, I will. And I will contact the city clerk's office to see if they've received any. For all I know, they've already received some. I don't know. I
I
haven't
don't
asked that
know either.
question. But, yeah,
Okay. All right.
thanks for the reminder.
Okay,
Roger, if I could add one thing on that, I was gonna bring up anyway. As you may remember, there's a little bit of a new interview process with
Right.
boards.
right.
And so we'll be asking the water board, our October board meeting, if anybody's interested, be on the interview team and setting up, whether you do it as all the board members, or generally the city clerk's saying best just a couple so you don't overwhelm the applicants, but certainly could do it as a board. And we'll probably set those interviews up in November so that information can be given to council, and then council does the final interview if they need an interview and selection in December. So
We had that discussion, and as I recall, the way we left it is we would individually decide if we want to be in interviews or not. And if you want to be in the interviews, I think we left it, so be it. So that's kind of where we left it, Ken. Unless somebody's saying, well, 2 is the number, but I didn't get that indication that it was, so.
Actually, 2 is the number, so you can do it as in this meeting so that it's a posted meeting. Or if you want to have an extra meeting to do it, you can either do it with 2 so that it doesn't have to be posted, or you need to get the city clerk's office to post it a week in advance if all, you wanted to have it without the staff, but more than 2 board members.
Okay.
So it's just like any other
Yeah.
open meetings and law thing.
So, anyway, we'll ask in October.
Okay, very
We'll
good.
follow up with the board on that. Just so
Last item, item scheduled for future board meetings. Any questions or comments on what we have listed in our program? Or anybody want to add anything to it?
I kind of wonder, so we tend to have, what I've noticed, so when I first started, back, whatever it was last year, let's say, through that fall and into the kind of winter, we were really heavily engaged with a lot of discussion about cash in lieu. And I think that one's kind of self-sustaining, because there was this big change, that we were asked to kind of participate in. That's somewhat self-sustaining at this point. Sometimes we have development activities, sometimes we don't. And then what I tend to notice is just like this meeting, right? It seemed like there wasn't a whole lot kind of to chat about. 3:30 rolled around and it was kind of like, well, gosh, we might be out of here by 3:45. And then we kind of like had almost like an impromptu type workshop in a way, right? About kind of some kind of bigger issue, right? But where a lot of questions came up and we were talking a lot about, different conservation approaches and the like. So So I'm wondering whether we should have almost kind of a list of tackling some of these bigger issues in a slightly more prepared way than just kind of chatting kind of informally when the time is available. Like when it seems like we're going to wind down at 3:45 and then all of a sudden we just start chatting about stuff. Whether or not we kind of build in, a half an hour or something into each of these meetings, that could be the first thing to kind of get knocked off the list if the discussion of the other issues runs longer than expected or something, right? And so whether there are kind of topic areas that we could have a more kind of considered and discussion where we all kind of expect that that's what we're going to talk about if the time allots or something. So those types of things could be many of the things that we talked about today, right? I mean, it could be things about how to kind of manage water a little differently to kind of keep water in the river for various times of year, et cetera. It could, and we could have a point person who has in their hip pocket kind of the talking points on those issues, again, if of course, give priority to the things that are on the agenda, but maybe have a half an hour's discussion kind of in our hip pocket, waiting if we have time that may kind of, that we can have those discussions.
I think it's a good point. I think my thoughts is if we have something burning that we feel that we're time restricted on, if somebody has something like that, we ought to feed that to Ken or have that so we all know that it's sitting out there if we can tackle it. And I have no problem with that, and it probably would be a little more thought-provoking if we knew that's down the line and we could sit and think about it.
Isn't that what the call at the beginning of every meeting for adding items to future agendas is there for? Because, as the stimulus this time was the report about the workshop, right? And it was, if all that's on the table, here are all these other topics. Now, what a time for Heather not to be here, right? Because ideally she would prepare a list and then we would put those on future agendas, but not all at once.
Well, we are recruiting, so
Yeah.
Heather will help us.
Heather will help. Okay.
No, that's a good point.
So
It was a good discussion. I mean, I'm
Absolutely.
glad we had the time because.
We're still
Yeah.
a half an hour early.
But Marcia, I gave you 10 minutes and you took 25.
No, I took my 10. Just was so interesting.
No, it was a good discussion.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Okay, anybody else? Well, given that, let's adjourn the meeting.
It was a good meeting.